Damien Rigden is a jack of all trades. Among other things, he's an illustrator, he's a painter, he's a printmaker, he's a musician, and he's an author. He does all the things.
Hi, my name is Damien Rigden, and I'm a printmaker. I'm a pen illustrator. I'm an acrylic painter. I'm an author and poet, musician and producer. My origin story. So I was always an artist growing up. When I was younger, I was very active in art class, and I think the time that I fell in love with art is when my art teacher taught us how to draw trees. And from that point on, I spent years trying to draw trees, and that's how I started out. Eventually, I got more into pencil drawing, and I reached this point where I sort of found myself drawing a line and erasing it, and then drawing another line, and then erasing it again. And I just was in this vicious cycle of like second guessing myself and not really feeling like I was making any progress. So I made this decision to draw everything in pen. And so I bought myself a little moleskin notebook and a pen, and I just tried to draw everything I saw in pen. And every mistake I made just became part of it. And eventually I started to get more confident, and I would just draw and appreciate the imperfections in it. You know, it's not about being perfect. It's about learning how to work with the imperfections that you made. And ultimately, like at this point, it's those imperfections that really make the art. Personally, I think that the value in art is that space between photorealism and where you end up, and in between like completely representational photorealistic art and where your art lies. That's the style. Probably painting was my next thing. The pen is just black and white, and obviously as an artist you want to start expressing yourself in color, and there's something like forgiving about painting, especially acrylic painting, where it dries really fast, where you can you make a mistake, you paint over it, you make a new color, and is this sort of like living piece of art, and you don't, there's no, like, you when you're doing a pen drawing, you'll run out of paper eventually, right? And you can't really edit or change or do any more. But painting, you can just kind of go until it's done. And so that was like a natural transition for when you're learning to use colors. You need that flexibility and that forgiveness. So eventually, I think printmaking was my next trip, where I went to an Escher exhibit in the Netherlands. I visited the Escher Museum, and I had obviously seen some other prints at like the Currier in Manchester and Boston Museum of Fine Arts, and it was something that interested me. But I started off with that by taking a class up at the New Hampshire Institute of Art in Manchester, and learned all the basics of printmaking. And then eventually I studied under a master printmaker. I just sort of came across his studio. I went in, introduced myself. He took me under his wing and studied reduction woodcut printmaking for a year and a half. And now I have a little press in my studio in my basement, and I make prints too. Reduction woodcut printmaking is a method of doing multicolor prints. So you imagine like a woodblock relief print. You sort of carve away everywhere you want white space to be, and you print the rest. You can think of it, printmakers often hate this comparison, but you can think of it like a big stamp. It's much more challenging than a stamp, but like that's the general idea. So reduction woodcut printmaking, you do a multicolored print not by carving separate blocks for each color, but by slowly carving away a single block and reprinting over and over again. So usually you start by printing a white, and you'll do whatever sort of silvery, creamy, sort of the base of what you want your whole print to be. And then you'll carve the block, and that is everywhere you want that white to be. So all your highlights you'll carve away. And then you'll take your next darkest color and you'll print over everything with the block that's remaining. And so you keep this process going along, and you carve away where you want each color to be, then you print on top of everything with the next color, and you're slowly reducing the block until there's, only a tiny little bit of the block left, like the outlines of the drawing, and you print your darkest color, and then you sort of run out of block, and your print is what it is. So kind of tangential to all of this, I started playing music in high school. I played bass. I was in a bunch of bands. I was in another band in college, and have just sort of in the background always played music over the years. I like hip hop a lot. I listen to a lot of like Talib Kweli, Run the Jewels, Aesop Rock. That's sort of where I draw some influence as far as like the style that I like. I kind of do my own thing. I call it experimental hip hop because I use like weird time signatures, which isn't very typical for traditional hip hop. It's always like 4/4 time, and I go in like 7/8, 9/8, 5/4. Like I try different things, and my flow ends up sounding kind of non-traditional just because I'm doing different things like that. So I contacted a friend who's a musician, and I said, hey, I have this idea. I want to try and write some lyrics. You want to help me out with music? And so we started a music project together for a few years, wrote lyrics. He, sort of made music for it, and we produced some songs. And then eventually got to a point where I wanted to try and produce the music on my own. So it was just sort of another thing to try. And I made some beats that I liked. I had a little recording studio set up in my basement. And I made my debut album. I released it at the beginning of August this year. I'm really proud of how it came out. And this is just like another thing that I do. So I guess you want to hear about my books now. Let me take a little tangent here. So I've been married for 6 years. My wife is very supportive. You can imagine I'm kind of a handful. I've got all these creative projects. I'm always thinking about art, and one of the things I tried was like stand-up comedy. I did stand-up comedy a couple times, and it went okay. It's not really something I could fit into my life, but I think it was a little while after I tried that and decided that wasn't really for me, that I had this idea to write a story, and I was just driving around in my car. I'm like, oh, I have this cool idea for like this sci-fi story, and I come home and I told my wife like, hey, I have an idea for a story, and she's just like, oh. So I tried writing it. I had a friend who's a writer. He put me in touch with an editor. She loved the story. It was like a short novelette, I guess you'd call it. It was like 15,000 words. And I just tried it, just like everything else I try, and shared it with this editor. She loved it. She worked with me. We released it, published it on Amazon, and my wife liked it, by the way. She's on Team Book now, Team Author. Yeah, it was fairly well received by people. I mean, it was like, I'm an engineer by training and have no background in writing. I just had a story to tell, and I tried my best with the knowledge that I had to do it, and came out pretty well. I learned a lot. And my most recent project out of all of these media is another book that I released like a week and a half ago. And that was a longer full-length novel. And it's actually 2 books. So it's kind of a unique project. The Voynich manuscript is from like the 14th century. It's like an encyclopedia of these like otherworldly plants, and written in a writing system that no one's ever seen on record anywhere else. So I had this idea for a novel. I'm like, okay, I want to write a story about people trying to solve this Voynich manuscript. And I thought about it for a bit, checked it on Google, and there's like 12 other stories about trying to solve the Voynich manuscript. So I'm like, okay, let's not do that. And I'm like, how can I still do this story? So I'm like, I'm an engineer. I do like, I'm a mechanical engineer by training, but I also do like computer programming and stuff. And I'm like, I'm going to make my own book in a secret code, and I'm going to write a story about solving that. So I came up with this unique cryptographic cipher. I made an alphabet. I turned it into a font. I did a bunch of illustrations, and I wrote an entire story that I've like encrypted in a secret code. And that book is like by an author that's in the novel. And the other book is an action adventure story about people trying to solve it. And that story has all of the clues in it that you need to actually solve the book. So this is like a puzzle that I've made that you can actually solve. So I released that like 2 weeks ago. So that's my biggest obsession right now. So when I was younger, I really fell in love with the work of Van Gogh. I think just like any person does. I mean, I don't feel like I'm really unique in that, but he saw the world in a certain way, and he was able to translate everything he saw into this style. And so it made me think about developing my own style in a way where someone could look at my art and say, Damien did that. For me, I'm not as drawn to photorealistic art. The value in art is the style and like where it deviates from photorealism. That's where the like style of art is in. And so I sort of took that idea and tried to come up with my own style for doing it. So I have a studio. It's in my basement. It's like maybe a little bit of a basement dungeon thing, concrete floors, pegboards on the walls with all my art hanging up, 4 or 5 tables, one where I can like kind of work standing height, and I'll carve blocks, or I'll cut out templates, or, sort of any hand work creating stuff. Tables that I sit and draw at. I've got a little 7-inch etching press, which I do like little kind of 6x9-inch block prints on. And that's sitting on top of a bass amp in the middle of my studio floor. I have another table where I sort of keep all my acrylic paints, and I have an easel that I set up and canvases all over the place. And so when I'm doing paintings, I use that table. But like my writing, I'll do, in the living room upstairs, or out in the front yard on an Adirondack chair or on our back porch. A lot of the end of these 2 big projects that I finished, both the album and the book, I have a 4-month-old, and so he was born, and I'm on paternity leave, and there was this period of time every night where my wife had gone to bed to like take a nap for a few hours, and I would have him asleep on my chest on the couch, and I just sort of had to rock him and keep him asleep so my wife could get some sleep. And so I found myself, I'd have like 3 or 4 hours every night just on the couch with an infant sleeping on my chest, and I just had my laptop on my lap, and I made beats. I worked on my music. And so it was a really like sort of productive snapshot in time where I just had this huge chunk of time to make art every night. And I had a little passenger, but I finished my album, I finished my book, and I just try and capitalize on those little moments in my busy life where I have free time. Like, I don't watch TV. When I have free time, I make stuff. What's next? Like my next art form that I'm going to try. Maybe this is a little out of left field, and this is maybe down the road when I have some more resources and stuff like that. But one thing that I've always wanted to try is design like handbags, like women's bags. I learned how to sew at a young age, and I spent a year in architecture school, and I learned a lot about design and form. And I've sort of always been like fascinated by designs and what's popular, and just seeing the variation in it. And I have always just wanted to try that. So when I have enough free bandwidth and I can maybe get a sewing machine that can sew leather, I might try that. But in the meantime, it's just these other 5 media that I make. I've just finished a book. I have an idea for another story. I started beats for more music. I'm probably going to fire up my press in my studio. I'm just like, I have ideas, and I'm very good at like following through with projects. So my big sort of advice or rule that I live by is always follow through with the big projects. You can sort of put them down now and again and do little things to just sort of keep you moving along. But I find if you always finish the big projects, your life sort of becomes punctuated with all of these accomplishments and sort of measures in time of like parts of your life where you're working on different things. And after years of doing it, you just have this like body of work of big projects that you're really proud of. And so I'm always coming up with new ideas. I'm always taking notes. I'm writing down thoughts. But when I pick up a big project, I always finish it. And that's sort of something I live by. So like I said, I finished this book a couple weeks ago. I'm in between projects, which is really stressful for me. I always need to be like working on something. But, you know, soon enough, I'll pick the next project and I'll finish it up. My artistic journey really, like my serious artistic journey really started with the pen drawings when I got that book and my pen and sort of gave up worrying about mistakes. And so all my visual art really stems from that sort of origin. A lot of how I ended up where I am is I just try things. I just try new things and I either like it or I don't, or I see room for improvement and I just sort of have my own blinders on creatively a little bit. I do like to consume other media and other art, but I'm just sort of like, I can be laser focused and just be working on what's in front of me. And it's either comes out the way I want it to or it doesn't. And then I just try and make the next thing better. So I love making art. And I think if you were to lock me in a room for the rest of my life, I would just never run out of things to do. To see more of my work, check out theartofkane.com.
Thank you for joining our virtual Art Week. City Arts Nashua appreciates the support of our sponsors and of you, our viewers. Please continue to support our local artists and our musicians and our theater groups. For more information on arts in Nashua, visit cityartsnashua.org.